Okay. The last part of chapter 2 is section 7. And with section 7, we're talking about inequalities. And I want to take some time talking about different notations that you're going to have. So, like, for example, if you have x is greater than 4, I know you didn't have to solve that or anything, but I just want to talk about the graphing side and so many different ways of expressing this. We've done this many times in class. We used open circles to represent greater than or less than, where it wasn't equal to that number. What your and then greater than is to the right. What your test will look like online, it will be a parentheses. And if it is an equal to, so less than or equal to 2, let's just say that. And instead of it being a closed circle like we did in class to the left, they would represent it as a bracket. Also, some other notation things. We call this interval notation. So if something's greater than 4, okay, it is going to be 4 or larger. And this says the exact same thing. And this is called interval notation. And the reason why I have parentheses for both of these is because it's greater than and it does not have equal to. And infinity, since you can never touch infinity, it's also parentheses. But here's one thing I want to point out. With interval notation, you always put the smaller number first and then the bigger number second. So if I skip to interval notation with the less than or equal to 2, since it's equal to, I'm going to have a bracket. And since 2 is the largest number, I'm going to put it on the right. And it's going to go to negative infinity, and like I said, you can never touch infinity. So we just put that in parentheses. So that's interval notation. Also, you could see it written as this. Okay, this is called set builder notation. So this means all the value of x, okay, and then you just write x is less than or equal to 2. That one's a little bit easier to understand because it basically looks just like the beginning, but didn't want you to get thrown off guard by seeing these different ways of writing the same thing. Now, when it gets to actually solving inequalities, it's just like solving an equation, except when you have a negative, you need to make sure you flip the sign. So if we had an inequality, x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 6x minus 16. Okay, and instead of subtracting x and getting a positive 5x on the right side, I'm going to get a negative by subtracting 6x, so that I eventually have to divide by that negative 5 to prove the point that anytime you divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign. All right, so here you subtract 4, okay, and you get your negative 20, and right here you divide by a negative. So anytime you divide or multiply by a negative, that sign has to change directions. So now that is now a less than or equal to, and we already talked about how to graph that. Here's your 4. Okay, it's going to be a bracket less than or equal to, which is the same thing as closed circle less than or equal to. Okay, which is the same thing as bracket 4 to negative infinity, which is the same thing as set builder notation as all of x, where x is less than or equal to 4. All the same. So those are all just a little review of inequalities. We did a lot of those in class, but just want to talk about the notation of it.